The starship floated dead in space. Its engines were broken. Its lights were dark. Smoke filled the hallways. Captain Park stood alone on the bridge, watching the enemy ship come closer through the cracked window. She was a small woman, 5 feet and 3 inches tall. Her black hair was tied back in a tight bun. Her uniform was torn and burned in several places, but her eyes were calm. She had been a soldier for 15 years. She had seen worse days than this. Below her feet in the cargo hold, her crew of 47 people waited. She had ordered them to surrender. There was no point in everyone dying, but she would not hide with them. A captain goes down with her ship. That was the old rule, believed in old rules. The enemy was called the Dominion. They were insect creatures, tall and covered in hard shells like beetles. They had conquered half the galaxy. 47 different species had fallen to them. Humans were next on their list. They had attacked Earth's colonies for 3 years now. 12 worlds had fallen. Millions of people were dead or enslaved, but Earth still fought. Humans always fought. It was what they did. A bright light filled the bridge, closed her eyes against it. When she opened them again, 7 warriors stood before her. They had teleported directly onto her ship. The warriors were huge, 7 feet tall, with 4 arms each and eyes like black marbles. They carried plasma lances that hummed with deadly energy. Their bodies were covered in armor made from their own hardened shell. The leader stepped forward. He was bigger than the others, with scars across his face and chest. His translator box spoke in a cold, mechanical voice. "I am commander of the 3rd Swarm. You are now a prisoner of the Dominion." Did not move. She kept her hands visible at her sides. Her pistol was still in its holster on her hip. "I am Captain Park of the United Earth Defense Force," she replied. "Welcome aboard my ship." Made a clicking sound with his mouth parts. It might have been a laugh. "Your ship belongs to us now, Captain, as do you." He looked around the empty bridge. "Where are the others?" "Safe." "You will tell us." "They surrendered according to the rules of war. They are in the cargo hold. I expect them to be treated as prisoners, not slaves." His black eyes studied her for a long moment. In 300 years of conquest, he had learned many things about different species. Humans were strange creatures. They were small and soft. They had no claws, no armor, no natural weapons. Yet they had resisted the Dominion longer than anyone else. "You make demands," said. "Interesting. Most species beg at this point." "I am not most species." "No, you are human." He said the word like it was a disease. "Your people have caused us much trouble. 17 of my ships have been destroyed fighting your fleet. Good soldiers have died because your kind refuses to accept the truth." "What truth is that?" "That you have already lost. Earth will fall. It is only a matter of time." Smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who knew something you did not. "Commander," she said, "my people have a saying. It is not over until it is over. We have been saying this for thousands of years. We have survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and our own stupidity. We are still here. We will still be here long after your dominion is dust." His warriors shifted nervously. They were not used to prisoners who talked back. "Your weapons," commanded. "Remove them, slowly. Any sudden movement and my soldiers will kill you." Nodded, she reached slowly for her holster. Her fingers touched the grip of her pistol. Then she stopped. "Before I do," she said, "I want your word. My crew will be treated according to the Galactic Conventions on Prisoners of War. They will not be tortured. They will not be separated. They will receive food and medical care." "You are not in a position to make demands, Captain." "Then I am not in a position to disarm." The plasma lances hummed louder, did not move. She stared directly into his eyes, her face showing nothing but calm determination. The moment stretched out like a rubber band. 10 seconds, 20. The warriors looked at their commander, waiting for the order to fire. Raised one of his 4 hands. His soldiers relaxed slightly. "Very well," he said. "You have my word as a commander of the third swarm. Your crew will be treated according to the conventions. Now, your weapons." Nodded and slowly drew her pistol. She placed it on the floor. Then she pulled a knife from her boot, a small backup gun from her sleeve, a thin wire from her collar. She placed each item carefully on the deck. Watched with growing unease. How many weapons did this small creature carry? "Is that all?" he asked. "That is all I am required to surrender under the conventions." The words hung in the air. Required to surrender. That meant there were things she was not required to surrender, things she was keeping. Chose to ignore this. He had won. The ship was his. The human would be taken to the flagship for questioning. She would tell them everything she knew about Earth's defenses. "Take her," he ordered. The warriors moved forward and locked magnetic restraints around her wrists. She did not resist. She let them lead her through the corridors of her broken ship, past the bodies of dead, toward the teleportation point. But as she walked, her eyes were busy. She counted the guards. She memorized the door mechanisms. She noted every detail of the armor and weapons. They thought they had captured her. They were wrong. She was exactly where she wanted to be. The flagship was called Inevitable Victory. It was a massive ship, bigger than any human vessel. It carried 5,000 warriors and enough weapons to destroy a planet. For 300 years, it had brought death to anyone who opposed the Dominion. Was taken deep into the ship, through corridors that smelled like chemicals and old blood. The walls were covered in strange writing and symbols. The lights were dim and orange. Everything felt wrong to her human senses. They put her in a small room with metal walls and a single chair. The chair was bolted to the floor. They locked her restraints to the chair so she could not move. Then they left her alone. She waited. Hours passed. They were trying to make her afraid. It was a common technique. Leave the prisoner alone with their thoughts. Let them imagine what was coming. Let fear do the work for you. Closed her eyes and breathed slowly. She had been trained for this. All Earth Defense Force officers went through resistance training. They learned how to survive capture, how to protect information, how to stay sane when everything was designed to break them. She thought about her home, a small apartment inn overlooking the sea. She thought about her mother who still made kimchi the old way. She thought about her younger brother who had wanted to be a pilot like her. He had died at the Battle of New Manila 3 years ago. She would not let his death be meaningless. The door opened. A new entered. This one was smaller than the warriors, with a more delicate body and longer antennae. Her shell was covered in scars that formed patterns. Each scar represented a successful interrogation. "I am Inquisitor," the creature said. Her voice was softer than almost gentle. "I will be asking you questions, Captain Park." Name, Park. Rank, Captain. Service number, UED 7749 Alpha. Made a sound like dry leaves rubbing together. "Yes, I know this game. Your people all play it. Name, rank, number, nothing else." She moved closer, studying with her black eyes. "Do you know how many humans I have questioned, Captain?" "I do not." 47. All of them played this game at first. All of them talked eventually. "Then you have never met someone like me." Santini twitched. "Perhaps we shall see." She pressed a button on the wall. A machine lowered from the ceiling. It was a complex device with many thin metal arms, each ending in a needle or probe. Had heard stories about interrogation machines. The stories were not pleasant. "This is a neural stimulator," explained. "It connects directly to your nervous system. It can cause pain without causing damage. The pain can be increased without limit. There is no physical injury that could kill you. You could experience this for days, weeks, months." Name, Park. Rank, Captain. Service number, UED 7749 Alpha. "I am going to ask you questions now. If you do not answer, I will use this machine. If you lie, I will know and I will use this machine. Do you understand? I understand that you are wasting your time. His gentle voice did not change. We shall see. First question, what are the defensive positions of the human fleet in the Sol system? Said nothing. The pain came. It was like fire and ice at the same time. It started in her spine and spread outward through every nerve in her body. Her muscles locked. Her teeth clenched so hard she thought they might break. Her vision went white. But she did not scream. The pain stopped, gasped for breath, her body shaking. Second question, said calmly. What are the access codes to Earth's orbital defense platforms? Looked up at the Inquisitor. Sweat ran down her face. Her heart was beating so fast it hurt. Do you want to know something about humans? She said through gritted teeth. Tell me. Long ago, before we had ships or cities, we were hunters. We did not have claws like predators. We did not have speed like prey. But we had something else. We could run forever. We would chase animals for hours, for days, until the animals collapsed from exhaustion. We ran them to death. The pain came again, stronger this time. His body jerked against the restraints. We call it persistence hunting, she continued when it stopped, her voice breaking but determined. Our bodies were built for suffering, for enduring, for continuing when everything told us to stop. Increased the intensity. The pain became something beyond description. It filled the universe. There was nothing else. And still did not scream. She did not beg, she did not break. 4 hours later, finally stopped. The Inquisitor stood very still, her antennae flat against her head. For the first time in her career, she did not know what to do. The human was still conscious, still defiant. The machine's readings showed pain levels that would have killed most species, that would have driven any permanently insane. The human was smiling. Is that all? Whispered. Step back. There was something in her eyes that looked almost like fear. We will continue tomorrow, the Inquisitor said. I will be here, will you? They took to a cell after that, a small dark room with a hard floor and no furniture. They threw her inside and locked the door. Alone in the darkness, finally allowed herself to shake. The pain had been worse than anything she had ever experienced, worse than she had imagined. Part of her wanted to curl up and cry. Part of her wanted to give up. But there was another part, a deeper part, the part that had survived ice ages and plagues and wars, the part that ran animals to death, the part that looked at impossible situations and said, not today. She reached into her hair and pulled out a small piece of metal. It was from her destroyed ship, palmed during the transport. It was thin and sharp. She began to work on her restraints. The thought they had broken her, they were wrong. This was only the beginning. The prison camp on Thresh 4 was a terrible place. The moon had no atmosphere, so everything was underground. Thousands of prisoners lived in tunnels carved from rock, breathing recycled air that always smelled like sweat and fear. Every day they worked in the mines, digging up rare metals for the war machine. Many died. Nobody cared. Lieutenant had been here for 6 months. He was a tall man with broad shoulders and a face that looked older than his 30 years. Before his capture, he had been a tactical officer on the destroyer. He had watched his ship die around him. He had watched his captain die in his arms. He had been taken alive only because the wanted information. Now he was just another slave, but had not given up. In whispered conversations during rest periods, he had found others like himself, former soldiers, engineers, scientists, people who remembered what freedom felt like and wanted it back. They had built a network, slowly, carefully, passing messages through looks and gestures, waiting for the right moment. That moment came when Captain Park arrived. Was working in the main tunnel when the guards brought her in. She was thin and bruised, her face carrying the marks of interrogation, but she walked with her back straight and her head high. She did not look like a broken prisoner. She looked like a soldier. The guards threw her into the work line and left, moved closer, pretending to adjust his mining tool. "Captain Park," he said quietly. Her eyes found his, sharp, alert, calculating. "Lieutenant, Tactical Division," he kept his voice low. "We have been waiting for someone like you." "How many?" 237 humans in this camp, 42 with military training. We also have contacts among the other species. Nodded slowly. She picked up a mining tool and began to work, blending in with the other prisoners. "Tell me about the other species," she said. Worked beside her, keeping his movements natural. "There are three main groups. They are the crystalline beings in Section 3. They were scientists before the conquered them. They know more about technology than themselves. Are they willing to fight? They are pacifists. They do not believe in violence, but they are willing to help in other ways. And the others? The Morth are in Section 5. Skinned, humanoid. They used to be warriors, a proud military culture. The broke them 200 years ago. Most have forgotten how to fight." "Most," smiled grimly, "some remember." "And the third group?" "The pale ones." His voice became sad. "They have been slaves so long that they have forgotten everything else. They do not even have a name for their own species anymore. They call them pale ones because of their white skin, and they accepted it." Was silent for a moment, processing this information. Then she said, "Take me to meet them, all of them." Over the next 3 weeks, moved through the camp like a ghost. She spoke with the elders, learning about ship designs and security systems. She trained with the Morth veterans, teaching them human combat techniques while learning their own. She even sat with the pale ones, speaking softly to them about concepts they had forgotten: hope, freedom, dignity. They were afraid at first. Violence went against everything they believed. "We cannot fight," their leader, a being called Harmony, told her. "Our philosophy forbids it." "I am not asking you to fight," replied. "I am asking you to help others who are willing to fight. Is that against your philosophy?" Harmony's crystalline body flickered with light as she considered this. "You speak of indirect action, providing knowledge rather than violence. They stole your people. They use your scientists as slaves. They have destroyed everything your culture built." Leaned forward. "I am not asking you to kill. I am asking you to help us take back what was stolen." After a long silence, Harmony agreed. The Morth were easier. Their leader was an old warrior named Broken Stone, who had fought in the last war against the 2 centuries ago. He had watched his entire civilization fall. He had spent 200 years in chains, believing there was no hope. "Why should we trust you?" he asked. "Humans are weak, small. You have no armor, no claws, no strength." "We have something better," said. "We do not know how to give up." She told him about human history, about the wars they had survived, about the times they had faced extinction and refused to die, about the fire that burned in every human heart. By the end of her speech, Broken Stone was crying. Morth rarely cried. It was considered a sign of weakness. "I had forgotten," he said. "I had forgotten what hope felt like." "Then let me remind you." The hardest challenge was a drone, the lowest caste of society. Drones were bred for labor. They had no rights, no freedom, no future. They were considered property, no different from the slaves they guarded. Noticed him watching her during the second week. His eyes followed her movements with something like curiosity. Most looked at humans with disgust or contempt, looked at her with wonder. She approached him one day when no other guards were nearby. "You watch me," she said. Flinched. Drones were not supposed to speak to prisoners unless giving orders. I am sorry. I will stop." "I did not say stop. I asked why." The drone was silent for a long moment. Then very quietly he said, "You do not bow. All the others learn to bow. Even the Morth bow now, but you never bow." "Why should I?" "Because the commanders will kill you." "Then they will kill me standing," studied his face. Does that bother you? I do not understand it. I have been taught that the swarm is everything, that the commanders are always right, that obedience is the only virtue. His voice dropped to a whisper. But sometimes at night I dream of something else, something different. Smiled, it was a kind smile, not a mocking one. There are stories, she said, that before the swarm became what it is now, drones were different, that you had your own names, your own choices, your own lives. Those stories are forbidden. Forbidden things are often true. She walked away, leaving him alone with his thoughts. 3 days later came to her with a data chip. On it were guard schedules, security codes, and a complete map of the command center. I want to dream when I am awake, he said. I want to choose my own name. Took the chip and placed her hand on his arm. It was a human gesture that meant nothing to culture, but somehow understood. When this is over, she promised, you will choose 1,000 names. The alliance was complete. Human, Morth, Pale One, and one brave drone who dared to dream. Now it was time to plan. The night of the uprising began like any other night. Guards patrolled the tunnels. Prisoners slept in their cells. The great machines of the mine continued their endless work, grinding rock into dust. But beneath the surface, something was different. 237 humans were awake, their eyes open in the darkness. 50 Morth warriors lay still in their bunks, hands wrapped around hidden weapons. A dozen Pale Ones whispered prayers to gods they had almost forgotten. And in the section, crystalline beings hummed with quiet energy, preparing for the moment that would change everything. Lay in her cell, counting down the seconds. The plan was simple in concept but complex in execution. 3 phases. Each one had to work perfectly or everyone would die. At exactly midnight, the shift changed. This was the moment when the fewest guards were active, and his team moved first. They crept through the ventilation shafts that they had mapped. Each person knew exactly where to go and what to do. They reached the communication center in complete silence. 2 guards stood inside, monitoring the screens that connected the camp to the fleet above. They never saw his team coming. The humans struck fast and quiet. Within 30 seconds, both guards were unconscious on the floor. The scientist called Bright Mind stepped forward. Her crystalline fingers moved across the alien controls with expert precision. Screens flickered and died. Alarms went silent before they could sound. Communications are disabled, she reported. They cannot call for help. Phase 1 complete. Phase 2 began immediately. Throughout the camp, cell doors clicked open, not because the guards opened them, but because Bright Mind had taken control of the entire security system. Prisoners poured into the tunnels. Some were confused, some were afraid. But the military veterans moved with purpose, organizing the others into groups and leading them toward the armory. The guards realized something was wrong too late. They were scattered, outnumbered, and caught completely by surprise. Morth warriors who had pretended to be broken for 200 years suddenly remembered how to fight. Humans who had seemed weak and small turned into fierce soldiers. The armory fell in less than 5 minutes. Plasma lances changed hands. For the first time in years, the slaves were armed. But Phase 3 was the most dangerous, and that was mission. She led a strike team of 12 through the maintenance tunnels that ran beneath the command center, had provided the access codes, had disabled the sensors. Everything was going according to plan. Too easily thought, something felt wrong. The feeling became reality when they emerged from the floor hatch into the command center itself. Commander was waiting for them. He stood in the middle of the room, surrounded by 20 of his best warriors. They were the elite guard, veterans of 100 battles, wearing full combat armor that gleamed in the orange light. Their plasma lances were already powered up and aimed at the hatch. Captain Park said, his voice was almost friendly, "I wondered when you would make your move." His heart sank, but her face showed nothing. She climbed out of the hatch slowly, her team following behind her, was at her right shoulder. The others spread out in a loose line. 12 humans against 20 elite. The odds were impossible. Yunu said, I suspected. Your species is predictable in its unpredictability. Compound eyes glittered with amusement. You could never simply accept defeat. You had to try something. It was only a matter of waiting to see what. Then why let us get this far? Because I wanted to break you properly, not with pain or torture, but with hope. He gestured at his warriors. You dared to dream of freedom. You convinced these slaves to believe in your dream, and now they will watch you fail. That will break them more thoroughly than any machine ever could. Looked at her team. She saw fear in some eyes, determination in others. They had come so far. They had risked everything. And now it was going to end here in this room, surrounded by enemies. She thought about giving up. For just a moment she thought about it. Then she remembered her brother dying in her arms at New Manila. She remembered his last words, "Don't let them win." She smiled. "Commander," she said, "do you know why humans invented the concept of last stands?" Tilted his head, curious despite himself. "Tell me." Because we discovered something about ourselves. In the moment when all hope is lost, when death is certain, we stop being afraid. She lowered her weapon and spread her hands wide. Fear is what keeps prey animals alive, but courage is what made us human. "Disarm her," commanded. His warriors moved forward, raised her hands as if to surrender. Then she spoke loudly and clearly, "That's your first mistake." At that exact moment, every light in the command center exploded. The room plunged into absolute darkness. They whose compound eyes needed light to see were instantly blind. They stumbled and crashed into each other, crying out in confusion. The humans were not blind. Had spent 6 months in near-total darkness. The strike team had trained for weeks in pitch-black conditions. They could feel their enemies' movements through sound and vibration. They knew the layout of the room from maps. They moved like ghosts. Grabbed the plasma lance from the nearest warrior's hands before he knew she was there. She struck him down and moved to the next. Around her, she could hear her team doing the same. Grunts of pain, bodies hitting the floor, the hum of weapons changing owners. His voice roared through the darkness. "Emergency lights now." Red emergency lights flickered on, dim but enough to see. The room was transformed. 20 elite warriors lay on the ground, unconscious or groaning in pain. His team stood over them, barely breathing hard. Only remained standing, and his plasma lance was pressed against his chest. "Your second mistake," she said quietly, "was thinking surrender was our only option." Looked at his fallen warriors. He looked at the 12 humans who had defeated them. His compound eyes showed something that might have been shock, or perhaps respect. "How," he whispered. "You conquered species who needed light, sound, comfort, all the things we learned to live without." Pressed the lance harder against his armor. "You never faced a species that evolved in darkness, that hunted in silence, that turned every weakness into a weapon." She stepped back and gestured too. "Secure him, we have a ship to capture." The flagship Inevitable Victory was theirs before dawn. The bridge of the Inevitable Victory was quiet now. The battle was over. The crew had been locked in the cargo holds, the same holds where they had once kept their slaves. The irony was not lost on anyone. Stood before the main window, looking out at the stars. Behind her, humans and Morthan worked together at the control stations, learning how to operate a ship that had conquered worlds. In the corner, Commander knelt in magnetic restraints, forced to watch everything. Approached and stood beside her. His face was tired but proud. "Captain," he said, "we have full control of the ship. Weapons, shields, engines, communications. It is all ours." "The prisoners." "All freed. The who surrendered are being held in Section 7. The ones who resisted." He paused. They did not survive. Nodded, war was ugly. It always had been. But sometimes ugly things were necessary. And she asked. Smiled, he has chosen a new name. He wants to be called Free. Free tested the word. It is a good name. She turned away from the window and walked to the communication console. This was the moment she had been planning since the day she was captured. The moment that would change everything. Open a channel, she ordered. All frequencies. Military, civilian, diplomatic. I want every corner of space to hear this. The officer at the station pressed several buttons. Lights flickered across the console. Channel open, Captain. You are broadcasting. Took a deep breath. She thought about all the people who would hear her words. Slaves in labor camps across the galaxy. Soldiers fighting hopeless battles. Species who had forgotten what freedom meant. And themselves who had built their empire on the belief that they could never be defeated. She began to speak. This is Captain Park of the United Earth Defense Force. I am broadcasting from the captured flagship Inevitable Victory. I am speaking to every slave, every prisoner, every conquered species in the Dominion. She paused, letting the words sink in. They told you that resistance was impossible. They told you that humanity would fall, just like all the others. They told you to accept your chains and forget your dreams. Her voice grew stronger. They lied. Today, on the moon called Thresh 4, humans and an Morth and Pale One stood together. Today, slaves became soldiers. Today, we broke our chains and captured the unbreakable. Today, we proved that the Dominion is not as powerful as they pretend to be. She looked at as she spoke the next words. To my fellow humans, Earth still stands. Our fleet still fights. We have not surrendered and we never will. Help is coming. Hold on a little longer. To our new allies, you are not alone anymore. What we did here, we can do everywhere. The fire has been lit. Now we spread it to every corner of the galaxy, every prison camp, every slave world, every place where people still remember what it means to be free. To the Dominion, you made a mistake when you underestimated humanity. You made a bigger mistake when you gave us a reason to hate you. And you made the biggest mistake of all when you thought you could break the human spirit. She leaned closer to the transmitter, her voice dropping to something cold and hard. We are coming for you. Every world you have taken, every species you have enslaved, every crime you have committed. There will be a reckoning, and it starts now. She cut the transmission. Silence filled the bridge, then slowly began to clap. The Morth veterans joined him. They made their chiming sound of approval. Even the pale ones who were still learning how to express emotions made small sounds of joy. Spoke from his corner. His voice was hollow, defeated. You do not understand what you have done, he said. The swarm has ruled for 10,000 cycles. Our fleets number in the millions. Our warriors are without count. You have won a single battle. You cannot win the war. Walked over to him and knelt so their eyes were level. You are right, she said. War is destruction. Billions will die before this is over, your people and mine, soldiers and civilians, the innocent and the guilty. She let him see the weight of this knowledge in her eyes. I do not want this. None of us want this. Then why, demanded, why fight when you know the cost? Because the alternative is worse, stood up. Your empire has been built on the suffering of others. Every day it continues, more people lose their freedom, their dignity, their lives. War is terrible, but slavery is not better. At least war can end. She turned away from him and looked at her crew. Her strange, beautiful, impossible crew. Humans who had survived torture. Morth who had remembered their warrior hearts. Who had set aside their pacifism for something greater. Pale ones who were learning to hope again. And one drone who had dared to choose his own name. Captain, the communication officer called out, we are receiving responses to your transmission. Show me. The main screen lit up with messages from across the galaxy. Human colonies were sending support. Morth worlds were rising up. Scientists were sharing military secrets. Even species that had been conquered before humans existed were finding their courage again. And then a familiar signal came through, a human military frequency. "This is Admiral of the Fifth Fleet," a strong voice announced. "Captain Park, we received your message. We are mobilizing everything we have. What are your orders?" Smiled, she had been a captain of a small ship. Now she was something else. A symbol, a spark, the beginning of something that could not be stopped. "Admiral," she said, "gather the fleet. Contact every species willing to fight. We have a galaxy to free." She walked back to the window and looked at the stars. Somewhere out there, Earth was waiting. Her mother was waiting. The graves of everyone she had lost were waiting. "It is going to be a long war," said quietly, joining her. "Yes," agreed. "But we have been fighting long wars since before we had fire. We survived ice ages that lasted thousands of years. We survived plagues that killed half our species. We survived ourselves, which was harder than anything else." She placed her hand against the cold glass of the window. "They have ruled for 10,000 cycles. They think that makes them eternal." Her eyes hardened with determination. "They are about to learn that eternity is just a word, and words can be erased." Behind her, the bridge of the captured flagship hummed with activity. Former slaves learned to be commanders. Former enemies learned to be allies. And somewhere in the cargo hold, a drone named Free was teaching other drones about the concept of choice. The war for the galaxy had begun. And humanity, as always, was leading the charge. Not because they were the strongest, not because they were but because they were the most stubborn, the most hopeful, the most absolutely unwilling to accept that anything was truly impossible. The stars had seen many empires rise and fall. They were about to see another one crumble. And in its place, something new would grow, something built on freedom instead of fear, something that would remember this moment, this ship, this small human woman who looked at impossible odds and smiled. Captain Park had raised her hands in surrender. And that had been their first mistake.